Exercise 105 is on share tables and graphs. Now, this exercise about graphs and tables is no different to any other exercise we've done involving graphs and tables. And what you know about that is you just have to read the information about the graph very carefully, or the table very carefully. So with that in mind, I've added in a few different ways that information about shares could be presented. I guess this is a table, and this table is just, as it says, a snapshot of share prices across the top 20 movers. Now, what do they mean by that? They just mean the shares that have moved the most. Top movers would be the shares that have had the most significant change in price over a particular time. So I'll only read through one with you. Webjet Limited has a price of $15.58. Their total value of shares is 17 million, which would be very secure. The change has been minus $1, but they also show you that as a percentage, so that a negative 6.03. You can see with the next one, Beach Energy Limited, they've had an increase in the price of the share. You can take more time with that if you feel you need to. The next one is a graph, and it's the A2 Milk Company. So it's just about one company and what its shares have done. Whereas the previous table, lots of different companies and the changes in the price of shares. The thing to note about this one is that it tells you about the shares over a period of 1 year, so you need to be careful if you're doing calculations based on the data taken from the graph, And I guess the horizontal axis indicates that it's 1 year. The price by the end was $10.81. Previous close had been $10.87 the day before, I guess. They look like they could be recorded daily. There's lots of different information you can get here about A2 Milk, and that would be relevant if you were wanting to invest or buy their shares. Okay, the example I'm going to do is taken from the textbook. It's example 13, and these graphs show the movement in share prices for 4 banks from mid-October to mid-January. So they're 4 separate graphs this time about movement of shares. Obviously, it's important to read the title, so you know that this graph is about Robber Bank. This one is about BAN shares. This one's about Eastpak shares and NCM shares. They give you also in their title the closing price and how much of a shift there has been, and that is recorded for all 4 of them. A says, what's the highest price paid for the BAN shares? So make sure you're looking at this graph, and the highest price there looks like $26. Part B wants the lowest price reached by Robber Bank share. So we can clearly see that, Robber Bank share has its lowest price here on the graph. It's at its closing time, and they actually tell us, while I can't read that value from the scale, I'm going to use the fact that they have told us that the share closed at $25.61. So it's questions like this that you've got to be really mindful of And while you mightn't be able to read the exact values from the scale, then you need to be looking carefully at all the information that's given. See once the range of the prices in the NCM shares. It's fairly obvious to see that the highest price was the 19. I think you could be forgiven for reading the lowest price as possibly $12.75 or even $12.50. I know this example comes from the textbook, and I know in the textbook that they actually said $12. It's not that convincing to me that the lowest price is $12. It certainly looks more than that when I look at the scale. So while they've said 12, I will accept anything between $12 and $12.50, and at $12.50 that's a range of $6.50. D. Describe the performance of robber bank shares over the period. Well, robber bank shares are not doing so well. And we might write something like, these shares have decreased in value over this time period. There have been small times when they picked up again, but overall these shares have had an overall decrease in value. He asked for two similarities between all four graphs. If you step back a bit and look at them, they are quite similar. So there's many different answers to this. One could be that they all closed at a much lower price than they opened. They all peaked around October, November. They all certainly had their lowest prices in January. So any of those would be acceptable. And F, predict what is likely to happen to the share price of the four banks in February. Without more detail and knowing what happened last February, I think I would have to probably say that there seems to be a downward trend, and without, like I said, knowing anything further, I would say this downward trend in price is going to continue.